Okay, so what we're doing today is section 1.4, and we're actually splitting it into two parts. And so today we're dealing with just the part one. And so, oops, I guess I need a highlighter. Okay, so the absolute value. You've probably done some absolute value before we're simplifying, but now we're going to actually be doing some equations with it. It's the distance in numbers from 0. And so one thing to remember is if I go to the right, if I walk, it's still a positive distance. If I go to the left, it's negative, but the absolute value, because I'm doing a distance, is also positive. So absolute value is just always positive. Okay, so -2, the absolute value of -2 is just +2. When we have a problem like this, I do what's inside first. 5 minus 3 is 2, and the absolute value of 2 is 2. Here, if you notice that negative is on the outside, so I do the absolute value of 5 first, which is 5, and then I bring down the negative. So I know I said it's always positive, but this negative was on the outside, and so that's why it stays there. Okay, so now I do this first, the absolute value of 9, which is 9, and then I bring down everything else. 2 minus 9 is -7. Okay, so if there's operations inside like we had here, you do inside first, and then you bring down everything else and do outside operations. Okay, so let's look and see what happens when we solve. Well, I could do two things. I could take the absolute value of 3 to get 3, but I could also take the absolute value of -3, and it also gives me 3. So if you notice, there's two things that are going to give me that answer, okay? So the way that I set it up, let's get rid of these answers. The way that I set this up, and I have my students do this, is we start off by knowing there's going to be two answers. What's inside the absolute value always stays the same, okay? And so my first response is that x is equal to 3, because a +3 will give me the absolute value of 3. And then the next one, I make the second sign negative, and I change the answer, because an absolute value of -3 will also give me 3. So that's how I break it down. Now if I look here, again, inside stays the same. Whoa, what did I do there? Inside stays the same. And so it says absolute value is -5. Well, I can't have an absolute value -5. This is an example of no solution. Okay? Absolute values cannot equal a negative. So you can never equal a negative when you have the absolute value signs. Okay? So here are the steps. Step 1 is to get the absolute value alone. We'll do some of those on the next lesson. Step 2 is determine if it's possible. If the absolute value equals a negative, it's a no solution, and you stop the problem. If it equals a positive, you break it down where you have the positive answer and the negative answer. And then you solve each step. Okay? So these are the steps we're going to follow. Alright, so first of all, I look at what's inside. I do not change anything inside. Step 1 was to make sure everything's alone and there's nothing outside, and that's right. Step 2 was to check to see if it works, and it does work because it's a +8. So now I rewrite it. I write it x plus 2 is equal to +8. And then over here, the second one is x plus 2 equals -8. So again, I only change the answer. So to get rid of a +2, I'm going to -2. And so x is 6. And to get rid of a +2 here, I'm -2. So x is -10. So those are my two answers. Okay. All right, I would like you to try and set up number 2. Remember that you have to keep the inside the same. Let's see if you're able to break it down and set it up. Once you think you have it, press play. Okay, so the first one should have been 3x minus 5 is 10. And that's the positive side. And now the negative side, 3x minus 5 equals negative 10. And again, I only change the answer. Don't change anything else. Okay, so now I add 5 to both sides. So 3x is 15. And I divide by 3. So x is 5. Over here, I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So 3x is negative 5. And then I divide by 3. So x is negative 5 over 3. You will get some fractions. Don't freak out. Just leave them as fractions. You don't even have to make them mixed numbers. You can keep them improper. All right, last one. Absolute value. I'm not going to change this puppy right there. But I have to do my next step to see if it's appropriate. And look, it equals a negative. I can't do anything. This is a no solution. Those are the problems you'll like when you find no solutions because there's no more work to do. Okay? All right, so that's it. That's the basics of solving absolute value equations. Remember to go to these steps. We did not do any with step 1 today. We will get to that on the next lesson. But practice these other steps and it'll give you a good foundation.